So back in 2012, I started working with an organization called Project Knucklehead. And Project Knucklehead is a national nonprofit organization that works to bring the arts as a means of communications into marginalized communities. And so, specifically in Miami, we worked with a nonprofit treatment program that worked as a school-based alternative for youth that were in and out of the juvenile justice programs and also at risk of dropping out of school. And so for about an hour a week, we'd get together and we'd make music. And these kids were only a few years younger than I was, but while we were in that room, we were just jamming. We were building beats using bucket drums, tables, chairs, the walls, a drum set when we couldn't figure out how to set it up. We'd play popular guitar riffs using acoustic, electric guitars. We'd thump out smooth bass lines to accompany whatever song we were working to. And there was always one singer or a rapper who was ready to show off their skills in freestyle. And during that time, while we were collaborating and creating a group sound, we were working together. And these were not troubled kids, but they were empowered artists who were encouraged to share their voice, their experiences, and what they wanted within the safety of that room. So trauma-informed care is about providing it's about meeting someone where they're at and encouraging their growth in a way that will not bring them additional harm. So back in high school, I used to get frequent injuries to my knees due to a condition I learned of only this year. And so during that time with regular injuries, I became a pro at using crutches around the high school and with everything that was not handicap accessible. And also, I was the largest public high school in my county. And so getting from class A to class B, I'd go down this one hallway, up a questionable elevator, down another hallway, out through the glass doors, over the hills, through the woods to Spanish class I went. And by the time I got there, I was out of breath, panting, and with a fresh gleam of sweat across my forehead. And none of my teachers ever questioned what was going on or why I was there so late. Well, soon I got tired of crutching through this marathon, and I started taking the stairs. I started taking the stairs before I was supposed to be walking. And so I passed my crutches over to a friend, and I'd start with some stair hops and some straight leg swings. And eventually I'd get to my class a lot less tired than I was before, but with having put myself at a greater amount of risk for injury and injury to others around me. Sorry to those people. Didn't know it back then. But what does this have to do with trauma-informed care? Well, none of my teachers ever gave me trouble for being late. And why was that? Well, maybe I was just really mean looking or something, or they were just really friendly people. Or maybe they could see that I had gone through a physical trauma that led to an injury. And because of that, I didn't need more stress to get to where I needed to go any faster. Well, when I started hopping up the stairs, I noticed that people would make space for me, or they'd hold the door open for me. And honestly, back in high school, people are not just nice to be nice. And so I questioned why. But maybe it's because they saw that I wasn't enough pressure getting to where I needed to be. So I could use an extra helping hand, or I could use some space to not feel more rushed. People are a lot better at providing trauma-informed care when it comes to physical trauma, and it's something that they can see. You're not going to throw a ball to a girl who's holding crutches. So, what about the invisible injuries? What about psychological trauma? Trauma can impact a person's physical health, brain health, emotional well-being, spiritual well-being, and it can lead to things called invisible wounds, which can look like PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, or depression. Trauma can impact a person's brain through their hippocampus, amygdala, and prefrontal cortex. The hippocampus being the memory center, and your amygdala being the fear response, and that prefrontal cortex being the thing that kind of controls and regulates everything. So this is what helps me memorize it, because I have a brain glove over there in my backpack. And so, knowing these things, trauma can also lead to lasting traumatic injuries and psychological disorders such as post-traumatic stress disorder, substance abuse, anxiety, and depression. So, what is trauma? Well, I want to preface by saying I'm speaking primarily on psychological trauma because one, that is my area of work, and two, that is what's most easily overlooked. I once worked with a veteran who had this big, beautiful, fluffy service dog with a big, bright vest that said, "Do not pet." And so one time she tells me this story where she went to a grocery store and she was getting her groceries and some woman came over and started to pet her dog and talk to it like it was, just some random dog on the street. And so she got offended. It said, "Excuse me, can you not read? It says do not pet." And the woman got instantly angry with her and started yelling at her and saying, "What are you, some kind of freak? Are you crazy? Do you have some kind of anxiety disorder or something?" My veteran dropped her groceries and ran out to her car and sat there crying for at least 2 hours until she could get her emotions regulated enough that she could drive home. She didn't answer any phone calls after that. She canceled her appointments, didn't show up. And it wasn't until, with some therapeutic harassment, we got her back into the hospital. And so during that session, I asked what happened. She was telling me the story and sobbing, and she ends with, "I can't do this anymore. I can't take how mean people are because they don't see what's going on inside my mind." And that's what I mean by psychological trauma is easily overlooked. So my way of explaining trauma is that it is a subjective emotional response to a challenging and unexpected event that person either directly experiences or witnesses. And because trauma is a subjective response, two people can go through the exact same situation and end up with completely different reactions. And that doesn't mean one person's weaker than the other or another person's stronger. That's depending on whatever their personal backgrounds or tolerance levels are. So it all starts with asking and assessing. So when we meet someone, we need to assess and talk and discuss with that person to find out what's important to them, what matters to them, and how far they're willing to work. Because if we're just forcing different traumas or different treatments onto people, that can only lead to more injury. So I know assessment looks different across each field or each place that we work in, but the more we know, the better treatment we can provide without putting that person into more potential risk. So now that we have an understanding of what trauma-informed care is, how can that look in our field? So I'm going to take an educated guess and say that most people here know how to tune a guitar. Yeah? Well, I'm going to take it a step further and say that most people know how to tune using relative tuning. Well, imagine that the person you are assessing and treating is an old classical guitar that hasn't had the best treatment and has a chip on its side, so you know it's a little jaded. And so based off your first interaction with this person, or this guitar really, you notice that the strings are a bit rusty, the tuning peg's a little stiff, and the whole guitar is just out of tune. And so your goal is to get that guitar to be functional and to be playing well enough until you can get better supplies or you can get that guitar to better treatment within a guitar maintenance shop or something. And so you work on tuning it. You get that low bass string into as close to a low E as you can get, and you tighten that peg and the string stretches until it says, okay, this is good. And so you tune the next string to the previous and so on until you have about a functional guitar that will be good enough until, because you don't want to work outside of your scope of practice, the next person can take control and help with the finer details. So just like that, you've provided your patient with trauma-informed care because you listened to what it needed and you addressed those areas. So how does songwriting tie in with this? Well, my biased opinion is that songwriting is the ultimate means of self-expression when it's done right. Songwriting can be including lyric writing, music composition. I like to include spoken word or a combination of everything. It's about letting that person express what they need to express in a means that allows for full fulfillment. And so it's my job as a music therapist to say you need no prerequisites in songwriting, music, poetry, writing, spelling, or grammar to express your story. Because your story are your words and how you choose to use them. It's my job as a music therapist to make sure that you are heard. Because let's get down to it. No one can share your story like you. No one is capable of expressing your experiences because you're the only one who's been through them. Everything else is different perspectives. Because you know, Kendrick Lamar and Sia, they've got great music that just really gets you, and those lyrics do speak to you, and that music, you feel it in your core. But they're not your words. They're not your words, and it's not your story. Songwriting allows for an honest level of communication, expressing that person's fears, their hopes, their dreams, their worries, things that stop them in their tracks, in a way that is comfortable and shares and speaks to other people. Songwriting allows for resilience and for strength building, for understanding who you are and how you relate to others. It can be done individually or within a group. And that's a cool thing about it. And songwriting can also be exposing, though. So you have to be ready to write a song about a tree, which I did a few weeks ago, or write about a random experience or something seemingly nonsensical, because songwriting can be difficult and exposing. But keep in mind, it also allows for everything that builds on top of that. So, as music therapists, it is our job to give that person a voice and the tools that they need, whether that is verbally, non-verbally, with an orchestra, with the sickest beat you've ever heard, but with the quietest of voices that is just starting to peek out from the shadows. I mean, songwriting gave me my voice. Growing up, I had an on and off relationship with my father until he eventually left. And so this rocky relationship created a lot of internal discord with me and made me question my value as a daughter and my role in my family. And so, going into my middle school years, when this internal discord really started to amplify more, I started improvising on my piano. And now I'd always been musically inclined or musically involved with school, with church, outside activities, things like that. But it wasn't until I started creating music and I started playing music that actually meant something to me, that was something that I felt and I experienced and I expressed, that music allows for an emotional release. So, move on to high school. I went to an arts magnet program and I studied musical theater, so I want you to think Glee, not Mean Girls. And during that time, I started to write more, and I had my first teacher who was a Black woman, my junior year of high school. And for the first time in my life, I felt like someone invested in me. I felt like there was someone who wanted to hear what I had to say and what my culture had to say and how that influenced me and what my pride lied in. For the first time, I realized that I didn't have to look like or act like the people who stood around me. I was allowed to wear my skin and my culture on my sleeve and in my heart. And I was allowed to express that through my art. Well, the musical theater thing obviously didn't last that long. I just didn't have the personality or the pizzazz or passion for it. But I did start investing more in my songwriting. And so I used my guitar and my lyrics to help me sort through whatever emotions came up or whatever feelings were going on at that time, because it is high school. And I started to get the idea that maybe I could share this. If I want to be a singer and songwriter, I eventually have to, share something. So I shared with my teacher. And she said, wow, well, what else can you do? And so I started writing more, and I started sharing more. And the next thing I knew, I was sharing my songs in front of small audiences. And it was terrifying, even now. It was terrifying, and it was exhilarating, but it was validating. For the first time, I had a voice that mattered, and people were able to relate to that. And they told me experiences that kind of went along with the songs that I wrote. And I went, wow, that's pretty cool. So now, I work at the Miami VA healthcare system, and I work with mental health and veterans. And so I've worked with veterans who have had the best and the worst experiences and everything in between. And I have the privilege to work with veterans who have also experienced extreme traumas, whether it's inside or outside of the military. Outside of the military, being poverty, sexual harassment, sexual abuse, homelessness, adverse childhood experiences, and inside the military, being combat exposure and military sexual trauma. Well, sometimes I have veterans who come to me and say, I'm only here because my provider said music therapy could be a cool thing because I like music, but really none of these treatments work, so I don't know what to do. And it's in those moments that I have to know how to be able to provide my best trauma-informed care for that person. Also, there's a lot going on in our world today. There are political and social actions that are causing people to fear for their lives and for the lives of their families. It almost feels like there's a new mass shooting every week, and there's nothing that we can do. And there are protests and there are rallies, people who are asking for their basic human rights and to not lose their dignity. And what can we do in all of this? Well, we can ask. We can ask and we can listen to what they have to say. And say, well, why do you feel this way? Or what is it that they said that makes you feel this way? And how does that affect you? And what more do you have to share? Maybe it won't solve their problems, but it might help them get to the next day. Because everyone is here and they're just shouting into a void and no one is being heard. So, we can ask them to share and what do they care about and what matters most to them. We can help them write it down and put it into a music, into a song. We can help them create their anthem. And we can help them create their anthem and then share it with the world. Thank you.